All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. We're experimenting. Well, we're not experimenting more. We're actually implementing a new type of format, which we're calling micro topics. And these are more bite-sized, something easier for someone to consume more quickly. And today I have Sensei Suino and Sensei Legacy here. And what we're going to be talking about is how you build a student from the beginning through a system of martial arts. So not an ad hoc, like an actual system like Mukso, Ishinryu, Iaido, or Legacy, Shorin-ryu, Karate Jitsu, and how you use those systems to impact students. Yeah, I just want to mention Sensei Legacy is a 10th degree black belt. Sensei Suino is an 8th degree black belt, and I'm really proud to be on this call with them because they've both been instructing me for over 30 years, and that's a point of pride for me. So I'm going to jump right in with something. So both of the systems that we train in, they are actually systems. They have standards, they have a set curriculum, and individuals come into those things. So an individual person comes in, they come into that system, they have to meet those standards, and they have a certain curriculum. What thoughts, what's your approach, Sensei Suino and Sensei Legacy? I'll start with you, Sensei Legacy. When somebody comes in the door, first time, no martial arts experience, 70-year-old woman, 6-year-old kid, 18-year-old athlete, what is your approach with that person as you start bringing them in?
My understanding of it as a teacher is that I go under the rule of understanding is the key word. And as you know, when you came to the university the first time, it's like building a good house. You have to have a good framework, a good foundation. If you don't do that, the rest is iffy, right? So I myself at the university always took the white belts. The day you put your foot on the floor, you're going to meet in my dojo, you're going to meet me, right? Because once you have done that, it's easy when you have good habits and understanding, it's easy to build on that. So I take most of the time, and no one normally gets a yellow belt from me before 9 months, because I take them myself and I make them understand what they're doing. And then adding to that, you know, it becomes easy. It's just understanding how to teach something to somebody. If you make them understand it, it's easy for them to be able to do it. You know, I like to equate it to being a mathematician. If you ask somebody the square root of 2,367, you know, if they understand math, they may not have the answer, but they'll figure it out right away and give it to you. And that's
so can I ask you a question on that? When you say understanding and say, like, let's go to the white belt coming in, like the brand new person, is your goal to make them understand how to move their body? And like, is it about the movement, or is it why you're moving your body, or is it both, or which do you lend?
It's both. It's both, that they learn how to do it properly and they understand why they do it and why it's done this way. That's understanding. You can make people flail their arms around, and then that's as far as it goes. And a lot of times then it starts going out of position. They do bad basics, and then hence their martial art is bad. You know, it's not as good as it should be.
That's a great answer, Sensei. Sensei Suino, what thoughts are coming to you as we're talking about this?
Yeah, well, the nice thing about that is that they don't have to understand everything, right? They don't have to, when they come in, they don't have to understand all karate or all martial arts. They have to understand Legacy Shorin-ryu, right? The way it's done in this system and why. When I teach Iaido, I teach Ishinryu Iaido, but I also teach Ishinryu Iaido the way it was transmitted to me by my teacher, Yamaguchi Katsuo, right? So they don't have to know how to draw or cut with a sword in Katori Shinto-ryu, right? So it cuts down on what they need to know, and that way they can focus on the system, learning the system, the way the system is done. And personally, I think that's important for the first year, 2, 3, 5 years of somebody's martial arts, is that they focus on one system and really internalize it before they start dabbling and going around in too many directions.
So I have a question for the both of you. Maybe I'll go to you first, Sensei Suino, on this. Between the how and the why, let's say in the first 5 years of training, when somebody comes into your system, as a teacher, if you were giving advice to another teacher of how to build a student in a system, would you tell them to focus more on the how in the first 5 years or the why? Like, what's the balance of those two questions?
I would say that the default is to start with the how. A lot of people are going to be satisfied with the how. Some students are naturally going to be more interested in the why, but there's a certain point, like when those people become role models, that they have to understand the why. You know, I wasn't interested in the why when I started. I was interested in the how and how to kick ass. And it was only later that I started to understand that the why made me better at the how. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Mm.
Yeah. Sensei Legacy, what's your take on that? The how versus the why, especially in the beginning, in the first 5 years, let's say.
Of course, you have to teach them how to do it first. And then I think the why comes along with the person's personal abilities. Like if you have children, you're going to have to spend more time on the how to try to have them coordinate themselves. And then the why then reinforces and gives, say, the bone a little bit of meat, you know. And but also the why helps with your form and helps to understand. You know, if you show them the bunkai, which is an essential part of Shorin-ryu, you understand why you do it and then how it should be done because of the self-defense aspect of it or the martial virtue of it. So I agree with Sensei Suino.
It's funny, even after I said that, though, I'm starting to think about this. You know, sometimes when I teach at seminars, I'll teach principle-based martial arts, right? I teach, I'll start with the concept in Iaido, like structure. What is structure? Why is it important? Okay, let's do some techniques knowing that. Or on grappling. 99% of the people that teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo groundwork teach one technique at a time. They teach you how to link them and they teach transition and moves. My favorite way to teach is to go, here's the movement principles that we're working with, and let's see how the techniques grow out of those. So I'm almost questioning what I said a minute ago. And I'd love to hear some more thoughts on that.
Yeah, so where do you want to go with that then, Sensei? You know, do you have a question for Sensei Legacy about that?
What do you think about that, Hanshi? There's what are some of the principles that are important for Shorin-ryu karate students to know?
On a basic level?
Yeah, sure.
Well, it's the way that the style, what the differences are sometimes between styles, you can show that. And again, the bunkai is so important. That shows you the why, you know, and the direction that we're going in through the katas. And, you know, a lot through the katas also, even the basic katas, gives you a lot more answers, a lot more of the principles of the martial arts, you know, like you explained to them that this is how they passed on this sort of, I don't want to say secrets, but yeah, it was the secrets of what this move means. But it's not only that. Then there are theories of to understand biomechanics and different things like that, to start throwing that in. But that's in a little bit more advanced, you know, past like being a white belt and moving along into the color belts. You have to sort of start sliding that in. And again, it depends on the person's abilities and intelligence. And as a sensei, you have to sense or guess as to what type of a person you are. You can have a very aggressive woman come in, and you can have a very passive man come in, and you can have a child who is has a hard time understanding. So it's our duty. It's what we do. We're servants of the public to make them have better lives.
So it sounds like you're saying there's not a rubber stamp. There's not a, it's not a factory. You can't just go, okay, we teach this, this, and this to everybody. Sometimes, like you said, you have to pay attention and give them what they need depending on who they are, right?
A lot of people do and they fail.
Mm-hmm.
No, I have a lot of extremely, in my opinion, I have a lot of very good black belts and very good students, but none of them are, can go outside of the norm. Like by that, I mean, like, I'm never going to give somebody a 10th Dan before they're 7 years old. To me, that's the norm, right? It's the basic, after you get your show Dan and you want a second Dan, it's going to take you 2 years to get a second Dan. And then after that, if you want a third Dan, it's going to take you 3 years. That is the minimum time. So that adds up to when you go up to 50, 55 years, right? And nobody in my dojo has ever broken, not even Randy, but he come close. He and I decided to keep the rules. We're doing it for karate. We're not doing it for the individual. And if you want to give back, you want to put somebody who's in there better than you are. You want, if I turn out students that are all under my wing and they're not as good as I am, then generation by generation or sensei by sensei, karate starts to get worse. That's understood.
So there's a very powerful why behind the time limits in that system.
Yes.
Right.
And we stick to that. That's the minimum, right? That's the minimum. That's the best student you can possibly have do that. Mm-hmm. So sometimes for 4 years, you may take 5 or 6 years. And so it becomes more time. But that's how you turn out good students, by them being patient and you being.
I will say though, Sensei, that you have basic, well, there's standards, right? So I know both of you have standards. Like, you're not, if you can't put your Hakama and Monsuki on, you're probably not going to get your 6th Q. Like, that's not going to happen, right? Like, that's a standard. Like, it's not a high standard, but that's a standard. Like in Legacy Shorin, you're not getting your yellow belt unless you know the basic principles of movements and your 10 basics. Like, you have to be able to look, breathe, move your feet, move your hips, move your hands, step. Like, that's a basic thing. That's a basic thing that whether you're 70 or whether you're 6, you got to meet that standard. And that's something that comes in there. And then summation comes next, and then accelerating things comes next. But I want to go back to what you said, Sensei Suino, about, I want to challenge you on something and hear your thought on it. Because you said, now at this point, you like to work on strategies and let the techniques flow out of the strategies. I think for you and maybe some segment of the population, that's okay. But I think the average person can't do that. Like, I just don't think that's possible for them, especially if we're talking the first 5 years. So I'll ask you guys this. I think if you look at as a pyramid, your physicality has to be the basis of your pyramid. You have to actually have 2 arms, 2 legs, be able to move those things over a period of time, doing stuff. Then the next level for me has always been technique. You learn to do a block, you learn to do a kick, you learn to, and I think most people don't get to the place that you're talking about, Sensei Suino. I think most students never get there to the strategy level. They stay on the physical level, they learn the techniques, whether that's because their mind won't accept it, or they don't have a sensei who has good strategy because they don't have a system or whatever that is. They never actually can employ their techniques in a way strategically, right? The strategy is something super basic. Like, I just need to go faster, right? Like, which to me, that's an okay basic strategy, but it's also stupid on some levels because you got to be able to overcome speed and use speed. So when I say that to you, Sensei Suino, what do you think when I say that? When I challenge your comment?
I think I want to make sure we're talking about apples and apples. So there's strategy and principles, right? So
Okay.
strategy can be very simple, right? Like avoid getting hit and try to hit the other guy. And I think Mickey Mouse strategies are interesting and easy to teach basic people, but for people to live in strategy, it's very, very hard. And the only way a beginner could learn that is if their teacher walked them through that ladder every day, right? Kept them there. But principles, I'm just beginning to wonder. I've been thinking about that because when I teach, especially grappling now, I go, there's 3 or 4 underlying principles that are basically all of grappling: hip movement, alignment of the mutual bodies, and distance. That to me, that's it. I just summarized the entirety of grappling. It all comes out of there. Now, nobody, no white belt or green belt or low brown belt is going to be able to fabricate that stuff themselves, right? But it might be an interesting framework to teach. And sometimes at seminars, I do that. I go, okay, look, one of the key principles is hip movement. So here's some techniques that come out of that idea of hip movement. Whether that sticks in people's brains, I don't know. It sticks in my brain, right? But I've been doing this for 54 years. So,
Sensei Legacy, any thoughts on any of that? I have another question, so I'd like to move to another question after this.
Whilst we're on that, is, I would take a smart person over a strong person or a tough person, because it's in the strategies, right? And those you find in the kata. Your beginning is in kata. When you do kata, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about moving in against the person. You find your weaknesses. You find your strengths. And, once a fight starts, it's the smartest person is going to win. As long as you can, that your basics have taught you to deliver the necessary amount of power to knock the person down. So sometimes that may ruin your entire thing. It may be smart, but that's where your kata is. That's why you have to pound that kata to find out what you're weak at and get working on it.
I love that. So I have 2 other things, and I know, where are we for time now, Sensei? How much time do we have?
just under 11 minutes left.
Okay, so I don't know, we'll get to both of these topics. So so I'll throw 2 out and you guys can tell me which ones you want to, the difference between an actual style or like, let's call it a system. Cause I think style, I always think style is you're dressed nicely, there's certain, whereas a system can be a style. So what is the difference between having a system or just having, like Bruce Lee's, like Jet Kune Do, just everybody just takes whatever they want, and like, what is the benefit of one over the other, do you think? And the other topic that I'd like to get into is how do you keep a student going? Like once they've hit that spot where they're 5 or 7 years in, let's say is a magic number, they've got their basics, they're really good fighter, they're really good at doing their kata. So they've done all the exponential. How do you keep them motivated with the incremental? Which one of those 2 things should we dig into first?
I want to talk about number 1 because I know Hanshi had some thoughts on that earlier, and yeah, I can see where this can go really nicely.
Okay, so jump in there, Sensei Suino. Let's hear what you think.
Well, Hanshi had something he wanted to say about that idea of having a system versus not having a system, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
The system is obviously the best for me, because a system consists of the knowledge for generations. Like we're doing Matsumoto's techniques, plus each sensei may have a little bit more to add or understand it even a little bit better. And that way we benefit from that, as opposed to, let's just say, some guy gets to a black belt and decides to start his own school. And he has limited knowledge. I'm a 10th Dan. I've been in karate for 52 or 53 years. And I am still learning stuff. I learned stuff from white belts. I learned stuff from a white belt lady once, she was fighting and she made a mistake and tried to correct it. And it was like a perfect combination. And I use it when I fight now, you know, so definitely a style is the best. And people who cut pieces out um, are wrong. It's just wrong. You have to learn everything. You're not just teaching fighting, you're teaching life habits as well. And some of those require some type of strategy. It doesn't have to be in fighting, it's strategy and something else. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll hand it over to you, is the law. The law, eyes, feet, and hands. You know, I teach that to my students: look, step, and then hit. But if you're going to get bread for toast in the morning, you look to the fridge or to the cupboard, you walk to the cupboard and you use your hands and get it. It's the law on everything. So martial arts isn't always all about fighting, but making life itself better.
Yeah, and those lessons, you know, the people that jump right into I'm not picking on MMA, but they jump right into a martial system that's not based on a long-term traditional system, often miss out on those natural laws. You know, I think we on this call, we all believe that training in an orderly manner is good for you in the long term. It's good for the dojo and the association and the world because it teaches you how to be efficient, teaches you patience, it teaches you how to be systematic, and you can explore yourself in the world in the context of that. It's somehow, it's not true of everybody. I can imagine somebody comes along, you know, it might be that what Bruce Lee did was important to him in the universal sense, helped him grow as a human. I'm sure it did. But the vast majority of people that I meet that study martial arts end up becoming great citizens and having rich, full lives and enriching the other lives, you know, around them as a result of their persistence inside a system. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to provide a thought about, you know, when people take one or two katas here or there, and then they build a system around that, which that's how it started, but it evolved. I always think some katas didn't resonate with me in the beginning. Sensei taught them to me, and I was like, I freaking hate this kata. Can't stand it. But then later on, I loved it. Like now, like for instance, the Nahanchis. I think that was my worst grading. But now I love the Nahanchis. If I'm here by myself, I do the Nahanchis all the time. I love those katas. And then I think of the different body types and the different, you know, there's some katas that don't resonate with me. But if I chop them out and only take the ones that I like, then everybody loses. Like there's only a loss. There's not a gain there. There's only a loss. And martial arts has been gaining, right? It's gaining. It's getting better, as to Sensei's point before, right? It's getting, and if you're stripping it away for no reason, then you're just losing without replacing something that's better or equally as good.
Martial arts is for life. I have a lot of students who became world champions in kickboxing, and they have told me, I'm sorry that I didn't. They're now in their 60s, and I'm sorry I didn't go back and finish my martial arts, because what are you after? You're a retired kickboxer. But a lot of good guys, like Jean-Yves Thériault, for instance, the greatest of the great, is now back teaching karate and kickboxing. He's back doing that. And because it's a life enhancing exercise, it's for life. Whereas high kickboxing competition is a sport, and it's for re-peaking and becoming a champion, which is respectable, but it's not quite the same as a martial art is for life. Anybody who quits before 30 years is a quitter.
And so this brings to mind something that Randy, you said, and I don't know if it was original with you, but you said people need to come to the dojo to change them. They don't go to the dojo to change the dojo. And
Sensei Legacy always says that.
yeah, and so
here to change you. You're not here to change karate.
Yeah, and one of the, it's like, excuse the expression, but it's like bitching out to go, well, I want to learn this, but I'm not going to do the Naihanchi Shodan or right. That's that's you bitching out. Instead, you go, Naihachi Shonan's part of the system. I'm going to work on it until it makes sense to me, and then I love it. Right? That's a lot harder, and that means you're changing yourself. That you're climbing that particular mountain. Again, I don't want to cast too much shade on people that go off and do their own thing. I think God loves them, and they have a possibility of becoming enlightened. But in our path, right, in our classical martial arts path, I don't think you pick and choose, because as soon as you do, right, that's like going to the TV and sitting on the couch watching, TV and eating chocolates instead of doing your hard work.
Yeah, so there's another thing I want to talk about with that, and I know we don't have a lot of time because I don't think we're going to get into the student thing.
3 minutes.
Yeah, you and I had talked about this, Sensei Suino, at your campfire one time, and Sensei Legacy, you and I have talked about this often, and you brought it up, Sensei Legacy, about that link to the past, right? Matsumura threw a reverse punch. Sensei Legacy throws a reverse punch. I'm teaching little kids to throw a reverse punch. They've got that link back to him. Like Miyamoto Musashi swung a sword in an overhead cut. He drew his sword. He put his sword away. You swing, you draw your sword. You swing your sword. I think that's one of the really cool things. It gives us a different culture, maybe, if I can say it that way, right? A different lineage, a different history, a culture that other people don't have when they're just grabbing stuff and pulling it in from all over the place. Thoughts on that?
I would say that for people like myself, I reach back into that so many times every day. And it's never ending. You're not going to run out. But an individual may run out of ideas. And again, I'll agree with Sensei Suino. There may be a genius out there. It may be the next Matsumura. But 99.9 times of the time, that's not going to happen. It's like having another Jesus come along, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I love that, the way we talk about that, to evoke the legendary figures of the past, and our connection to them. Everything is made up of molecules and vibrations, and my weird harebrained theory is that some of that sticks to you, right? Generation to generation. A sword cut done within the tradition after 20 generations is going to have a little bit of that magic, that history stuck to it, right? Some of the molecules and the vibrations stick with it. It's a much more powerful cut. It's not just cutting the mat in front of it, right? It's cutting the fabric of the universe. And it sounds kind of grandiose, but I think that's how you get to the soul, right? Training with that stuff in mind.
Matsumura gave Itosu a part of himself. Itosu gave his student a part of himself. Yeah, and Benny Allen gave me a part of himself. I gave a part of myself to Randy. And that part of myself is the part that everyone was given, right? And handed down. So sometimes I say to Randy, geez, just now when I did that, I felt like Benny Allen. And you like it, you know what I mean? It warms you. You don't go bragging about it, but because nobody else can feel that.
There's the magic about it. Well, Randy, you want to wrap this up? Our alarm has just gone off.
Okay, so that's 30 minutes. So I hope people enjoyed this. If you didn't, I definitely did. So it was good to be in this conversation. And again, I think one of the things we like about this is that it's unfinished. We're not wrapping a ribbon on this, because the conversation is going to keep going. And that's one of the things about this, is that conversation is going to keep going. So we're going to wrap this one up. But listen, one thing I want to always be saying is we've got a new website. We're really heavily invested in this Punch Kick Choke Chat thing and the benefits. A lot of the community really loves it, and we're really happy that they do. So if you want to help us out in any way, we got a new website, punchkickchokechat.com, www.punchkickchokechat.com. Go there. You'll find all the episodes, all the information about us. Also go on Instagram, go on Facebook. If you want to take it to the next level, put a like on something, share something, subscribe to something. That's next level. And if you go to that website, one thing we'd really be interested to hear from you is who's a person or people that you would like us to be talking to, and what are some of the topics you'd like us to be cracking open with that person or amongst ourselves. So thank you so much, Sensei Legacy. Thank you, Sensei Suino. Thanks, everybody.